Chapter 13, Part 2, Behind Enemy Lines, bottom of page 77. Sitting there, leaning against the wall of the trench, every part of me hurt, especially my knee. I pulled up the brown pant leg. The knee was badly swollen, and just below the kneecap a piece of steel was protruding. It looked as though a large, misshapen nail had been driven into my leg. Something occurred to me. The shrapnel had hit my knee before I had changed uniforms, so there was no tear in the pants. Someone seeing this might become suspicious. Rubbing the wool fabric back and forth over the jagged spike, I ripped a hole in the pant leg, exposing the wound. Over trash, dead bodies, and collapsed earth, I crawled out of the trench. Not knowing where I was going or what I was doing, I found myself wandering along what had once been our front lines, limping, using a Russian rifle for support. The dead were everywhere, in whatever final pose death had forced upon them. Gutted tanks and other vehicles continued burning. I became aware that I was approaching a man, a Russian, sitting against the charred and shattered stump of a tree. His face was caked with grime and his hair singed off. He held badly burnt arms out in front of him. They were lathered with some kind of yellowish unguent, as though they had been frosted. He was grimacing in pain. Brown eyes gave me a distressed, curious look. Galava krushishta, I told him in Russian that I was very dizzy. Brown eyes blinked, looked at me uncomprehendingly as I hobbled past him. The pain in my knee became more than I could bear. I sat down on a broken slab of concrete. Before me, amidst heaps of other debris, was what remained of a shattered German blockhouse. One wall had been shorn away, and inside the place I could see dead men and a broken-looking weapon, a light artillery piece. An uprooted tree lay beside the blockhouse. Beneath its fallen branches, a bouquet of dead, black-brown sticks, lay the body of a German officer. His body looked broken everywhere. His uniform was smoldering. Moi! Niet moi! Across the way, two Russians were arguing like a couple of kids, scrounging for souvenirs, food, and any usable goods. They had come upon something they both wanted for some reason. They started bargaining, haggling for a can of peaches. One would give the other a German sheath knife. I grabbed to where my sheath knife would have been and realized there was none. I was wearing a Russian uniform and Russian gear, and there was a canteen there instead of a knife. From far behind me came a sudden flurry of gunfire, and then a series of explosions. Reduced to a spectator, I returned and looked to the horseshoe-shaped hillside, German battalion headquarters. A huge Soviet flag, red with a hammer and sickle, had been raised. It looked tiny in the distance, but it told me most of what I needed to know. Flurries of fighting were still going on in various areas of the hill, in and around the bunkers. To the south, German tanks were burning. A few others were in retreat, firing as they raced backwards. Clearly, the battle had been lost. We had been defeated. I didn't know if I even cared. I cared about the friends I had lost, Hal's and Oscar. Their deaths filled me with grief, and I was angry with them for dying, for leaving me. I turned my attention to my knee and began pulling at the spike of shrapnel buried in my flesh. I could move it a little from side to side, but couldn't pull it out. I leaned back against the blockhouse, my eyes on the dead German officer. I heard footsteps and looked up to see a large number of fresh Russian troops coming in my direction. I was terrified. Momentarily, it was my delusion that they were coming to get me. Frightened, I stood up. Using the wall of the battled blockhouse for support, I made my way around to the other side of it, as though I could hide there. Then I did an even stranger thing. I waved at the Russians, as I had so many years ago at parading Wehrmacht troops. Surprisingly, someone waved back. Leaning heavily against the Russian rifle, I heard a scratching, rustling sound on the other side of the blockhouse. I saw a hand, a left hand, come around the other side of it. The hand was in a claw shape, fingertips dug into loose soil. A man, the German officer, I had left for dead on the other side of the blockhouse, pulled himself into view. His face covered with grime and soot, his legs seemingly useless. He was dragging himself along the ground like some sort of fire-blackened, badly injured alligator. He looked up at me, and at first I didn't realize that what he was seeing was the enemy, and perhaps his executioner. "Nein!" he rasped. I did not see the pistol in his right hand until he fired. A bullet whined past my face. He fired again. I flew backward as something hot hit me in the side. Then I was just sitting on the ground, pressing a hand to my belly and looking at the German. He was continuing to slither away. A rifle shot rang out. He slumped, stopped moving. "Pomogite!" A Russian soldier hurried toward me, a smoking rifle in hand, and he was calling for others to come help him. Strong hands helped me lie down on my back. A bearded face loomed into view. "Are you hit bad?" the man asked in Russian. I looked up and saw what I thought was my grandfather. "Dishte namanya." "Breathe normally," he said. Kneeling beside me, he pressed a pad of gauze into the wound in my side. "Just take it easy, son," he said in Russian. "You're going to make it."